Alrighty guys, so in this video this is bag F. I am using 20-degree caster blocks. They are my caster block of choice. I use the stock zeros the steering knuckles and the stock 5 camber plates. This is just what I usually run everywhere for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the caster block arrangement because there's a lot of questions regarding that. One thing I do want to bring up is if you guys haven't noticed, we have two different kingpins here, and if you look, the silver one is a tad bit longer than the brown one. So which means is, like for instance with my setup, I run 2 millimeters on the bottom of the steering knuckle. So you would want to run the longer one, obviously, because you have more meat in there. If you're running equal top and bottom, then you don't have to choose short or long. You can put them anywhere. But what I like to do is I'll go and slide that silver one through. Go ahead and put my shims on that, or my spacers, and it'll kind of hold the pin in there for me. That's the most difficult part about our caster blocks. And also, this is a left-hand side one, so I like to generally put it on the pit mat, kind of like it's going to go on the car, so it makes a little more sense for me. So next, I'm going to slide my knuckle in, and if you put it in there the way that it makes sense to you, looking at it, with obviously your camber plate going to go, or your steering plate going to go there, when you slide it in like that, all you literally got to do, oh sorry, skipped a step, my apologies, there's these little collars you got to put in there first, sorry. So go back to that now. If you put it like it's going to go on the car, you actually slide it in and then slide your bottom one in. And then, now the top one is super easy. Just drop it in. And now that's built. Very, very simple, very easy when you do it that way. Now the next thing is though, you have set screws that slide in the front. So you want to make sure that there's a flat spot on the top and of these kingpins. You want to make sure that the flat spot is aligned with the set screw. So as you can see there, the set screw is right there, and the flat spots are coinciding with it. So now, like I said, anything goes in aluminum. You want to have Loctite. This you don't need to get crazy with. I've seen guys put way too much Loctite on this, and then in the event of a change, it is almost impossible because you can't get these screws out, or they strip, and then you have a big problem. And I've already pre-built the other side, just for simplicity's sake, so the video is not extremely long. Okay, so there's your caster block and steering assembly. So now on these camber steering plates, you see how there's a beveled edge on the steering there. That beveled edge is going to go down. So if you look, it'll actually sit flush in there. Without that beveled edge, it would actually want to sit off a little bit. So you set that in there, the manual, and I like to follow the manual on this side where they run the screws up. Some guys will run them differently, but that is their preference. I Loctite every single lock nut on the car, even though it has an eye lock on it. I like to make sure that my stuff never comes loose, which it's very, very, very rare if I do have something come loose. So now I'll go and just tighten it all up. You want to make sure that you put both screws in there first before you start tightening, so that way it's going on straight. Okay, so now that's your whole steering assembly. It's time for the universal now. Like I said before, I'm running the J&T N and B bearings. I like to slide the outside one in first as like a guide, and then put the other one on the universal, so that when you slide it in, it goes in super smooth. Slide your hex on. Put your hex pin in. Grab your wheel wrench or whatever, you can use channel locks, anything that you'd like in the sense to basically slide over that to hold that in. Loctite on the set screw, tighten it up. Now you don't need to kill these. You don't need to go super tight on them. The pin is actually captured by the wheel, so yes, you could lose the pin during transport, but for the most part, while the car is on the track, you will not lose the wheel. Or lose the pin because it is captured by the wheel. So like I said, I already did the other one, so there's your right and left castor block assembly and axles already all built. So next we're going to get into the diff case. Okay, there's a lot of questions on this regarding shimming. So like I said, J&T bearings, we're going to slap our bearings in there. The 12 by 21 and a 12 by 18. So once you put your bearings, I like just make sure they're spinning free. If they are not in there perfectly straight, sometimes they'll bind up. They're spinning free. Now the kit includes 2 of these shims. You only need 1. Okay, you're gonna slide 1 over your pinion gear. Sometimes it's a little bit of a pain to get on there. So the nice part is you bend one up, you have a spare one. This one's definitely hard. Quick little trick, throw a bearing on. And use that to press the shim on for you. Okay, so now that your shim's pre-installed, realistically, you'll never have to change that unless it gets eaten up. But basically, that's the only shim you're going to utilize. You're going to shove this pinion gear through, make sure she spins nice and free. Do not install the next shim. This shim, you're going to discard. Keep it as a spare. Now you're just installing your clip. So what I like to do is kind of just push it on there to the first step. I use just a simple little flathead. This is an air conditioning one. Any AC guy will have one. But any flathead will work. And basically then I'll just push it down onto the second groove while holding the pinion on the back side, because if you're not, you're just going to push it down. Okay, once you get the clip gun or on there, if you look, there's the opening. I like to center the opening of the clip with the opening of the outdrive. I've never had a problem with the clip falling off, but I figure in the event of a hard crash or something, that's the last thing I need is this thing binding up and potentially pulling that clip off. So just something I like to do. Okay, so that's built there now. So now we're going to go ahead and put our B block on. The kit comes stock with a 1. And this one here is it's a 3 dot, so that's how we indicate it. So the stock one is a 3 dot, the D817 one now is a single dot, and the Truggy one, which is 2.8 millimeters taller, is a 5 dot. So this is extremely important here because the kit includes only 2 for this bag. They're 3.5 millimeter cap heads, and if you look here, they almost look identical. There is a difference, but you got to pay attention here because you definitely don't want to put the wrong ones in here. So you put those 3.5 millimeter ones in there, and you're going to need a good drill because our plastic is extremely tight. This is why a lot of you probably think I have an overkill drill, but this is why. So a lot of you right now are going to be struggling. I'm not. Okay, take your hinge pins, and we provided now 2 extra 1 millimeter shims. A lot of you are probably wondering where that's going. You're actually going to slide these shims over this hinge pin, and I will explain to you why. Slide your hinge pins into your B block, And now there's actually set screw holes. Everywhere there's a set screw in this car, you want to make sure you put it in. So being that our hinge pins slide in from the rear to the front, now you can take your A block off without having to try and hold the hinge pin. This set screw holds the hinge pin so it does not spin, also increases rigidity in the car. Okay, so now that that's all done, let's go ahead and put the diff in. So prior to that, I remember I was telling you about marking your diffs. This way I know this is my 7K, this is my front diff. The kit includes 2 diff shims per diff. I generally like to start with both on each side, so one on each side. Slide it in there. Install your diff cover. You got to make sure that you install it correctly and not to pinch one of those shims, because you can bend the shim, and if you bend the shim, it will cause a bind in your diff. There's 2 top screws in. And be sure not to over tighten those. Those can strip as well. I've stripped those out before. The heck? Lost the nut. Anyways, I'll have to show you guys that in a little bit. Okay, so now it's going to sound pretty crunchy. It's fine. It's going to break in. It's easy to say. You can just install both shims. It's up to you though. If you want to do that, it will be fine. I generally like to free this thing up a little bit, and I will take one shim out on the left hand side. As long as your diff is not too loose, you won't have a problem. So now you can see it's a little smoother. It still has a tight, there's no lash. When I mean lash, meaning holding the pinion and rotating the ring gear. There's no lash, meaning there's no tick. That will break in, it will be perfectly fine. I'd rather break it in a little tight than too loose. So now we're going to put the tower on. The tower is pretty self-explanatory. You got 4 screws. Hold it on, they're flathead screws. Okay, so basically that's your assembly. It's all ready to go. I generally like to set that aside now. So this is an important part as well. These are stock arms. These are stock soft arms. This is what I run on the front. What I'll generally do is lay out my stuff there. And now you need to glue the insert in. I will apply glue everywhere that the insert sits. So anywhere on this cross webbing, basically anywhere it's going to touch. I just throw a bead of glue all the way around. It does not need to look pretty. Most of it will stay in the arm. This is just an added assurance. Plus, it increases the rigidity of the arm. Any tire glue will work. I prefer the Proline glue. So now, simply drop that on. And now run your screws in. Now you got to be careful not to get glue everywhere on your hands. You're going to see there the glue is going to actually come out of the arm, which is perfectly normal. So you see there, there's kind of glue oozing out everywhere. Perfectly fine. You grab yourself a shop towel, or I prefer a shop towel, it doesn't leave lint. And basically, you're just going to clean all that glue off. You're going to wipe it off. You can get in there. I personally just get in there and get it off. It kind of makes a mess the way I do it, but it's going to be covered in dirt anyways. See there? Good to go. You can do the same thing to the other arm. Anywhere the cover plate is going to touch. And you can do this with carbon inserts as well, and the hard arms. I generally tend to crash a lot, so I don't like running the hard arms. Yes, I do feel they are better. They add a little bit of steering, but I've hit pit lane a couple times being a donkey, and I prefer to finish the race. But if you're on a super high bite track or a really hot day, I would highly suggest running the hard arms in the front. If you're on a really cold day, definitely do not run them, because obviously plastic gets brittle when it's cold. Okay, once you run all your screws in, you can do the same thing. Clean up any excess glue that's oozed out. Make sure you do it quick so you don't get any towel stuck to it. So next, get the glue aside, you're going to run your droop screws in. Just run them all the way in for now. Just go and thread them in. Now you don't want to lock these things down together. I generally like to leave a 1 millimeter gap, or just put 1 millimeter spacer in between. So simply that right there is what I like to do. My race cars and stuff, I'll actually put a 1 millimeter spacer in between. One side gets the regular ball, one side gets the one that holds the sway bar. And then you can do the same thing again. Like I said, give yourself about a millimeter clearance. Okay, so next thing is you're going to see these balls here are very tight. They don't move freely. So I learned this in my low-C days. What I'll do is actually take your channel locks and pinch the ball. Simply like that. Give it a nice little pinch, kind of rotate around, pinch it again, pinch it again. You can see there, it frees up big time. So you're going to want to do this each and every time you replace a sway bar link or you build a new kit. Sway bars are extremely crucial with our cars, any car for that matter, and if they're not performing to their fullest, you're going to have a problem. So next, just slide the shock or the sway bar retainer pin or shock pin, whatever you want to call it, through to hold it in place. Okay, next we're going to take our sway bar retainers, and I like to thread them in the top first. and let them hang. And then now I'll take my sway bar, install it in the groove, and then let them fall back down. Make sure you do this by hand. These screws are very small and the hole is very small, so you can strip this out extremely easy, and then you have a sway bar that's not tight enough or it's too loose, whatever the case would be, and you don't want that. So you just want these things to be snug. Do not over tighten them. Okay, sway bar's in, it's not going anywhere. Next you want to attach your set screws to the front of the sway bar mount. Okay. Next you want to slide your sway bar to the links. Fumble the screw 6 times. And I like to have my sway bars flush to the back of the link. Okay, so now that that's all tight there, what you want to do now is tighten down your sway bar retention. And I have lost a set screw somewhere, so I have to grab another one. You want to tighten your sway bar retention side to side just until it frees it up, just like that. Now we're going to put it on the car. Actually, I haven't put it on the car yet. Got shock standoffs to do still. I run one hole from the bottom. Do a little Loctite on those guys. Go. Next we can go and do our camber links. Like I was telling you before, I like to put all my little hashes to the right. This can be a little difficult at times. I'll show you why. But generally I'll slide those through there. Since I didn't adjust them before, they're super long, and basically what's going to happen is it's going to pull the outdrive, or the universal out of the outdrive, which is okay. I'll show you what to do with that. Go and tighten these things down here. Okay, so now I'm going to take my 6mm wrench. And now I'm going to tighten this in. And it'll pull it in evenly, so that way you're not going too far on one side. You just have to line the dog bone up with the outdrive as you're tightening. Until it starts going in, and then from there, just get going. That's good. Messed up a little bit there. There we go. And I just kind of eyeball these. I don't get crazy with it because it's not final setup. Just get them to where they hold place or hold two. Take your next one, make sure it's going to the right. Which that one is not. See, I did it wrong. Okay. And I run short link here all the way down on the tower. Do the same thing now with the camber on the left side. Once you get that dog bone in the outdrive, it goes a lot faster. Okay. Next, we're going to put it on the car. Make sure you slide your dog bone in the center outdrive. Line it all up. Where you need a good drill again. Forget your bumper. And all we have left out of this bag is the 2 set screws that hold the sway bar pin in on the arm. You want to run those in just past flush. You don't need to go till they stop because they will pop out of the top arm plate. There we go. That is bag, I can't remember, F I think? Yeah, bag F. Alrighty guys, this is bag G. And first couple things I like to do. Inside the center chassis brace, there is a spot for a 3mm nut. I like to drop that nut in there now, and then throw a dab of glue on it. And while you're working on everything else, it has time to dry. Literally just a little tiny dab is all you need. If you guys can see it or not, but it is the minute amount of glue. Set that aside. Okay, so this is a big topic. I get a lot of people asking me how tight do I do my servo saver, stuff like that. So we're going to go through all that. First thing is you want to take your servo saver spring, you want to sack it out. Literally just take it, tighten it, crunch it down as far as it'll go a couple times. I suggest you do this on every car kit. Springs kind of have a memory, so you want to just sack it out. It builds its own strength back. So next you're going to slide this guy in there. And this is a trick that I learned many years ago. Our car does come with a aluminum servo saver, which is nice. Just take a little bit of grease. Just apply it around the servo saver there. Just kind of rub it in. This just helps with longevity and wear on the plastic portion of the servo saver. You just slide that in there. Just a little bit of grease is all you need. Nothing crazy. Next, you're going to apply your spring. And the kit does include this little dust ring cover. I don't use it. You guys can use it if you'd like. Now this is the tricky part. This is where a lot of people get confused. First of all, put a decent amount of Loctite. I put a lot in there just so it's I don't have to worry about it ever trying to back out. Start threading this guy on there. And you want to go until it bottoms out, which is going to get tough to turn unless you have really small hands. Okay, once you have it bottomed out, I do 2 full turns out. Actually, is that bottom? Let me make sure. No, it wasn't bottomed out. Well, it just bottomed out as far as I could go with my hands. Okay, so that's bottomed out now. So now I'm going to do two full turns or 2.5 turns. It's up to you, whatever you like to do. So there's 1, 2. Okay, so it's going to sit in the car like this. I generally will rotate your nut to where you can access it while it's in the car. So now you're going to take your tiny 2-bill screw, throw some Loctite on it. Run it through and tighten her down. That nut, or that screw, eliminates the chance of this thing backing off. It clamps over the threads. And that plus the Loctite, you should never have a problem with your servo saver coming loose, ever. Okay, next step is we're going to insert our collars. And this step here can be a little tricky because you kind of fumble everything. It's not real easy to handle. Tighten these down. This step here is very important to have Loctite. It's a high wear, or high abuse item, I should say, not wear. But your steering rack, every time you hit a wall or hit a jump wrong or anything, this thing gets beat up. So you want it as tight as you can get it. Okay, so the manual says, actually I don't even remember what the manual says. I like to do it this way. I'm going to take the screws from underneath, which are a 2.5 head. Throw a little Loctite on them. You don't need a lot here, because this is a screw that you're going to take off pretty frequently, most likely. And now I like to run this through, and there's a little groove it'll sit in, so that way it can't spin. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, steering posts are aligned, they're installed. Next step is install your bearings inside your steering rack. Let's slide that one on there, so let's go in aluminum. Slide the top bearings in. Now your top plate. Actually, disregard that. You need to install your chassis brace first. So now you're going to take your chassis brace, and there's also another nut on here I forgot. You're going to want to glue that one in too, on the bottom side. Little added security. Okay, put your top brace back on. Screws in. A little Loctite on these guys that go in the steering post. Not a lot, just a little. Okay, I'm going to run the screw on the bottom for the chassis brace. Which is going to be this guy. Alright, steering rack should be nice and free. Should not have any bind to it at all. If it has a bind to it, you did something incorrect. Next we'll go. Alrighty guys, this is bag H. Installing J&Ts again, N&Bs. It's my bearing of choice. Gonna snap your bearings in the rear hub, slide your universal through, make sure it's nice and free. Slide your hex on, hex pin. This stuff's gonna get real repetitive. Front to rear is pretty close to the same. Once again, you don't have to crank those things down crazy. The kit comes with number 3 camber plate stock, which is equivalent to the old number 5s on the D815. Help if I put it in the right way. But yeah, this is pretty much my standard for the most part. I don't really deviate too much from these. It's pretty much what I run everywhere. Those are number 3s. The only time I go to a number 4 is if the traction is pretty high or the bumps are pretty bad, then I'll go to a 4 just to free the rear end of the car up a little bit. Also, these hubs are not directional. You can run the left on the right and the right on the left. That's up to you. They are identical from left to right, which is nice for... I've never seen anyone break one, but I guess anything's possible. Okay, hubs are built. Now, next thing we're going to get into is the pills. I generally run a 2-dot down almost everywhere. Now, if you look here, let me get 2 that are the same. Okay, so these are both 2-dot down, but we have one that has the arrow facing the left and one that has the arrow facing the right. When I mean arrow, I mean this side here. It kind of develops an arrow, flat side there. So this is a 1/4 of a millimeter increment. So this is not perfectly centered. So meaning, if you have the arrow pointing outward on both of them, it will indicate you have a outboard toe, meaning you're going wide. I'm sorry, not outboard toe. You're wide right now. If you go both arrows facing inward on the front and the rear of the hub, meaning this side and this side, then you will be narrow. And if you have the rear one facing outward and the inner one facing inward, that means you have a 1/2 degree of inboard toe. And if you have the outer one facing inward and the inner one facing outward, so the hub would face this way, would indicate you have a 1/2 degree of outboard toe. I generally like to run a 1/2 degree of inboard toe almost everywhere I go. It's just what I like to do. It's just what I'm used to. Some of you may run differently, some of you may not agree with me, but that's the beauty of it all. You can run what you like. So this is going to be in the rear of my car. So you have, this one is pointing outward and that one is pointing inward, indicating I have a 1/2 degree of inboard toe. So I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Outward, inward. Hubs are done. Next step is the arms. Very similar to the front ones, except these are stock arms. I generally run hard arms, but on this car I'm just going to run the stock ones. When running the stock ones, you do want to run a carbon insert. Our carbon insert is a little thicker than the Avid ones, but it's personal preference. I've run the Avid ones, I've run ours. It's here nor there. Same thing though, you're going to want to glue them in. These ones you don't have to get so crazy with the glue, because a lot of guys generally try and reuse these. That's why I like running the hard arms, because if you run hard arms you don't have to necessarily worry about trying to reuse the carbon. But basically you want to try and put glue anywhere that the carbon's going to sit. Just help strengthen the arm, stiffen everything up. Once you get that, you got to make sure you're placing the beveled edge up, because that's where the screw goes. These you have to pop in. They kind of suck. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll use the screw to pull them in for me. They are extremely tight fit, which is good. Means your arm is super stiff, less flex. The Avid ones generally tend to just drop in, not be as tight. There you go. And you can do the same thing, wiping the extra glue. And that's that. Do the same thing again. the same thing. Use the screws to pull it down. I generally like to put the center screw in first. That'll almost pull the whole thing down. Wipe your excess off best you can. And there you go. There's your arms. Ready for install. Go and run your droop screws in. Let's get it out of the way now. But the carbon ones, they tend to seep the glue a little slower because it's a tighter fit. So you may have to touch it up a couple more times. Okay, now that you got your arms, they're already done. So this is going to go there, it's going to go there. Okay, so now I'm going to take my rear hub and now install it in the arm. Take your hinge pin. I generally just start with my hub centered. A lot of times I'll run with them running forward. This last shim can be a little bit of a headache, but it's doable. So, and you can over tighten these as well. So you want to make sure that you don't over tighten them. I generally tighten them up until they get tight and then loosen it up. That's what you want. You want it to be nice and free. Do the same thing on this one. Loctite. Back her off. She's nice and free. Good to go. Okay, so there's your hubs and arms all built. Go ahead and move into the diff case now. Once again, J&T bearings going in. Okay, same thing, only one shim. Same thing as the rear. You only need one shim, not two. Use another bearing to push it on. Makes it a lot easier. Shove it through. Install your clip. Take your flathead. And then I like to slide the opening of the clip to the opening of the outdrive. And that's it. Next, I'm going to take my C-block, which I'm going to install 3-dot down. I'm sorry, 3-dot up. You're going to run 3-dot up in the C-block. When I say dots up, I'm meaning The actual physical dots are going to be up. And the same thing, the 3.5 millimeter cap head. You want to make sure you grab the right one. Okay, and slide your hinge pins through. Now we're going to put our diff in. Okay, we're going to install our diff. You're going to grab your diff shim, and I'm going to go and start with just one on the right. See how that feels. Yep, should be good. Put your top screws in. Alrighty, now we can go ahead and install our arms. Actually, let's do the tower. Okay, once you got the tower on, some oil on my hands. Okay, we'll go into our arms. Just going to slide those. Actually, sorry. Sorry. Okay, slide your arms on. Your right, your left. Okay, now we're back to the pills, and it's the same thing as the front ones. You want to ream them out just a couple turns, like maybe a turn and a half each side. And we run our arms forward, all the way forward. So you do plastic shim, metal shim, plastic shim, metal shim, same thing, plastic, metal, plastic, metal. Now we're ready for our D block. For this one, we're going to run one dot up. Go ahead and slide that in there. Go and put these long guys in there. Arms nice and free. Go and put your hinge pin nuts on. Your arm's still free. Do the same thing to the other side. Good to go. Okay, gonna put our body mount in. I like to run mine in the high setting, so all the way up. Kind of equals the body out, makes it look a little nicer. Gonna run our standoffs in. I run one hole from the bottom. Wrong nut, wrong bolt, my bad. That's that. Same thing with our... So we're going to install this here. Same thing, one side's bigger than the other. Center drive shaft. So you're going to slide your center drive line boot over this, the bigger side. Just pull it over, and there you go. Voila. Shove that guy in there. Diff's kind of tight, but it will wear in. Alright, we'll go ahead and do the sway bars now. Actually, no, the sway bars are exactly the same thing as the first video, or the front end. We'll go ahead and do the our center chassis brace. So there's a 3mm nut that's going to slide in this side here. And you're going to take this long screw here. There you go. And there's a 4mm nut. It goes on the bottom of this guy here. Same thing, you throw a little glue in there. Just so when you're working on your car, you don't have to worry about the nut falling out. It's the worst thing ever when you go to put your car back together and you can't find a lock nut that came flying off. Now we're going to just put this top plate on, the rear brace. If you're running titanium, do not run titanium here. Okay, we'll go ahead and install our rear wing mount. Actually, you know what? I apologize, 1 second. Installed the wrong bolts. Okay. Long cap heads here. Gonna go there. Which I am running the high wing mount. Make sure not to over tighten these because it will pull it through the wing mount. Okay, so you want to make sure you don't over tighten these. They will pull through the wing mount. you go. Install your nuts for your wing. You can throw a little glue in there if you'd like once you put the wing on, so those nuts can't fall out either. Install your camber links. Adjust your camber and a rough eye, and install your sway bars, which were the same in the first one. And you should be squared away. So this is basically where you should be at. You got a roller now. Drivetrain is not terribly tight, but it's not super free. One thing that I did forget to include during the build, and I do apologize, is greasing your ring and pinion before you put the clips on. I just took mine apart real quick and did it. But prior to putting the clips on, I would highly suggest doing that, and I will throw it in the video as well. But basically, this is what I like to use. It's called Red and Tacky. You buy a big tube of it at AutoZone or at Home Depot. It's super cheap. Or you can use a J&T Verde grease. The green stuff they use is pretty good. The only reason I have this is prior to Tyler opening his business, I had this huge tube, and as you can see, it used to be about this tall, and that's about how much I've used in the past 4 years. So yeah, so other than that, that's basically where we should be. You just got to put the rear sway bar on, and then we're good to go. Alrighty.